Senior parochial vicar at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish. Father Bob is the second of 7 children and grew up in Bellevue, where his family belonged to Assumption Parish. His undergraduate degree is in theater arts from St. Vincent College in Latrobe. He attended Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and was ordained to the priesthood in 1980. He has served in a variety of parishes in the diocese. Just prior to coming here, he served as pastor of Our Lady of the Valley Parish in Beaver for about 12 years. On Monday, September 16th, Father Bob will begin a new assignment at neighboring Regina Coeli Parish. Please join me in giving Father Bob a warm welcome as he presents what the Eucharistic revival can mean to each of us.
You may have noticed after 2 years, I don't genuflect. It's not because I don't believe in genuflection, it's because my knees don't let me do it. You know, it's that. Well, one of the blessings of this past summer has been very, very much kind of a Eucharistic theme, really, going on. I mean, we started the summer getting ready for the ordination of the new priests, among whom was our own Father Dan Kushner. And then beginning of July, it started with this little thing, the 33 Days for Eucharistic Glory. It's a wonderful little book written by Matthew Kelly, part of that whole dynamic Catholic thing. And we did it kind of, it was a series of, well, the book is a series of private readings and reflections about the Eucharist and some of the saints and just some wonderful, wonderful things that everybody did privately and then came together one night a week, to discuss what it was that we had been reading and what touched us from what we read. And it was kind of a great fun, faith sharing in kind of a relaxed, informal kind of way. And I think that everybody involved learned that the Eucharist really does matter to lots of us, powerfully so, and that there was a strength and a solidarity, in seeing how much in that we all believe. But of course, you do believe. That's what brings you here tonight. Your faith does matter to you. There's all kinds of other things you could be doing on a Friday night. And yet you made it a choice. You made it a priority to be here. If you don't need to belong to a group to do this. If you get a hold of the book through Dynamic Catholic, anybody can do it at your own rate, at your own speed. It's just, it's just you could do it, sit it down for 2 weeks, pick it up again. It's not like school. It's just, a wonderful way to go inwardly and reflect a little bit more on what the Eucharist does mean to us. Another blessing that kind of made this a very Eucharistic summer was the lovely coincidence that all the Sundays of August, we visited the Gospel of John. And and section by section, we heard the great Eucharistic discourse there called the Bread of Life Discourse. Now, why does that happen? Well, Mark is the shortest of all 4 Gospels. And when it's Mark's year B, liturgically, what happens is that Mark isn't long enough to cover all the Sundays of ordinary time, all the green liturgical Sundays. So the church, in its wisdom, goes into John. And every 3 years, we get this wonderful little mini course on the Eucharist, that comes to us. And it coincidentally, or maybe it wasn't coincidental at all, that it just happened to coincide so beautifully with this year of Eucharistic revival. I guess the first thing I want to ask you to think about as I begin this tonight is to try to remember that all those Sundays, because it was every single Sunday in August that we heard the Bread of Life discourse. And as you heard that on Sundays, was there anything that you received? Anything that you took from that? Anything that caused you to wonder, to ask questions, or if that, whatever it did for you, that's a gift. That's a grace. That's the power of the Holy Spirit at work in you and in your prayer. Because the Eucharist, of course, it's so very crucial to us as Catholics and also to the Orthodox, those of us who believe in the real presence of Eucharist. And yet it's still something that divides us from other Christians, because we believe in transubstantiation. Now, believe me, I am not a theologian by any stretch of any imagination. I'm a prayer. But our belief in transubstantiation means that although it remains outwardly appearing to be bread and wine, and still looks like bread and wine, feels like bread and wine, tastes like bread and wine, that the inner substance, the inner reality of these elements, the bread and the wine, are transformed through our prayers and the power of God into the living presence of Jesus Christ. That he is really, truly present here. Body, blood, soul, divinity, Jesus is truly, truly present in this sacrament. It's a wonderful thing, but it presents problems, because that's why we can't do inner communion with other Christians. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they don't love God. Of course they're wonderful people. They love God. Of course they're going to heaven. But the thing is that what we believe about this is so important, and it is so sacred, that for anybody to receive it who does not believe and understand the way that we believe and understand, that becomes sacrilegious. It becomes disrespectful to what it is that we believe. Hence the whole nature of that problem. So let's go back then for a moment to that Gospel of John that we heard. And, if you can remember that, as Jesus is explaining this, as he's teaching them this brand new concept, that he was the bread of life. Unlike the manna from heaven that God sent to feed the Israelites all those years, that bread, the bread that Jesus was going to give, is his bread for the life of the world. And that if we eat that bread, we will never die. He promises us eternal life through the gift of the Eucharist. And so as he's doing that, if you will remember, the people are doubting it. They're questioning it. They're grumbling about this. They don't get it. They can't wrap their brains around it. How could they possibly? It sounds to many of them like he's talking about cannibalism. Of course, that's not what he means at all. Nobody can understand yet the sacramental reality, that Jesus is going to bring forth through the church. And so, as the story goes on then, if you will remember, Jesus does not back away. He doesn't soften his stance. He doesn't walk back anything he says. He doesn't tell anybody that they misunderstood or that he misspoke. He will not back away from what he's saying about eating his body and drinking his blood. And so as a result then, many of his disciples, now that's important. These aren't just like, the people there who to watch and see what Jesus is going to do next, to see what trick or what healing or anything is going to happen. These are the people who have been following him, his disciples. And many of his disciples then leave. They leave his company. They part ways with him because they cannot accept what it is that he's saying to them. And they don't trust him enough apparently to be able to follow him, even though they might have doubts or questions. Even still, Jesus does not change his mind. He doesn't say, oh, I'm sorry, come back. I didn't mean it. He doesn't apologize in any way for what he says in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel. Now, the 12, do they understand it? Of course not. How could they possibly understand what it is that Jesus is telling them? Not yet. Not yet. No, not until after Easter, until after the resurrection. Then they're going to begin to understand. But they know, remember, Jesus said to them, and you also, are you going to leave me? And Peter, speaking for the group, says, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of everlasting life. Even though they can't conceptually figure out or understand what it is that he's saying, they know enough to be able to trust that Jesus is going to lead them to wherever it is that mentally, spiritually, he's going to take them to be. So it's truly a wonderful thing, which speaks to us then about progressive development, about progressive understanding. It was Pope Pius X, who, I don't forget what year it was. I've been so bad in years, but it was early 20th century when he was Pope, that he was the man who lowered the age to receive Holy Communion. He put it down to the age of reason, down to about age 7, which I think is when most of us would have received our Holy Communion. I remember in my grandmother's picture album, that was a picture of her 2 older sisters who, were long dead. I never knew them. But they're in the white dress, the veil, holding, with flowers on and holding candles, and they're teenage girls, and I said, well, Grandma, what was that? And she said, that was her first communion. Well, me and my vast knowledge of everything, I thought, oh no, Grandma, that had to have been confirmation. And it was first communion. She was right, but it was before Pius X did that. That's how long ago that picture was. But it was Pius X that lowered the age for us to receive. And really all that is required for us to understand as children is that this is holy, that this is special bread, that this is unique, but hopefully then we do not stay then at a second grade understanding of what this is. And I am sure the very fact that you're all here tonight means that you have a much, much deeper understanding and appreciation for what the Eucharist is now in your life, than you did when you were children. And the point is that we always grow in it. We're going to continue to grow in our appreciation for the Lord, our appreciation for the Eucharist, our love for the Eucharist, our need for the Eucharist. It's not a stagnant thing. It's going to grow and grow and deepen until we breathe our last. So, this is, of course, such an incredible miracle, this gift of the Eucharist that Jesus gives himself to us. And it's something then that we individually then need to focus on, and check our beliefs and examine and see what it means for us, and to kind of grow deeper into that. And one of the biggest ways, I think one of the most important ways that we can do that is to make time to come into the church for prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. I think that's just so very, very crucial, to come into the church, to bring yourself, your life, your joys, your problems, whatever it is, to come in before the Lord, pour them out before Jesus. Jesus is present in the tabernacle. Doesn't have to be in the monstrance. He's present here. He's present now. He's listening to us. He knows that we're here. He's with us. He's part of this tonight. And it's so important. Just like any other relationship, isn't it? That when we spend time with somebody, we get to know them. The more time we spend with them, the deeper we get to know them. The more we love them, it grows. And so will our faith. So will our relationship with Jesus. It will grow and deepen and grow and deepen and grow and deepen the more we make time to be with him. We're fortunate in the sense that, we can't keep Incarnation open. That's so isolated over there. That's a problem. But this church is open every day till about 3 o'clock. Sebastian is open from, I think it opens a little later in the morning, but it's open till about 7 o'clock at night. Athanasius is open till mid-afternoon. There are times that we could go there. And I'm not saying every day, not come and do a holy hour every day, unless you can, unless you're free to do that, it's wonderful. But pop in. One of the reasons I think we were able to keep our churches open all the time, decades and decades ago, was that there was always somebody in it. People were always coming in, popping in, to go pray. Now it's a little different because you got to drive everywhere, especially here in the suburbs. But if you're driving by, McKnight Road, there's Sebastian's sticking out, all over the place. Here this is, Perry Highway, not, it's kind of on the road to everything. It's not hard to do. We just have to make time to come and do it. And it's one of those things that when we do it, the more we're going to want to do it, and the more we're going to need to do it. But it's truly very something wonderful to do. Sometimes with words, sometimes in wordless, but Jesus is always there to hear us. I remember when 14 years ago when my mother died very suddenly, I was pastor of St. Pius X in Brookline, and also Our Lady of Loretto down the road on the other end of Brookline. And I would go into the church and make sure that the doors were locked. I was in there all by myself, and I would go in there and sit before the Blessed Sacrament with my box of Kleenex, and I would just sit there and sob those first weeks after my mother died. And it was such a wonderful thing, not to cry, but the fact that I was with the Lord. And I could feel the presence of Jesus kind of just, on the back, kind of, okay, cry it out, get it out. It was such a holy thing to be able to bring that, to bring my grief, to bring my sorrow, to bring it before the Lord. It didn't go away, but it sure feels wonderful to know that He understands us. Wherever, whatever, He understands all that we go through. That's the whole thing that's the whole mystery of Christmas, friends. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He knows our human nature, and He knows all the pains that we go through. It's funny, I look back, and some of the most important spiritual revelations in my life have actually outwardly had nothing to do whatsoever with the church. I remember when I started in college, my Intro to Theater course with Dr. Eugene Saraceni, wonderful man. Saraceni prepared me for priesthood as much as anything I ever learned in the seminary. There was a discipline to the theater department. You had to show up. You had, he was tough, but wonderful. But anyway, I remember we're in this Intro to Theater class, and we're going over the poetics of Aristotle, the elements of the drama. And I can remember I'm sitting there in this class, and it dawns on me, wait a minute. Everything he's talking about, these 6 points about the poetics, I thought, that's the Mass. That's exactly what the Mass is. And I had this kind of aha moment. Later that year, just for fun, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. My older brother used to make me stay up with him at night and watch Chiller Theater. But I had never read the book, so I read the book, Bram's. It turned out to be another kind of religious epiphany. Because as I'm reading this, I realize, wait a minute. This is the reverse of the Eucharist. The promise, His promise of everlasting life is evil. It's evil. It's like the Eucharist reverse, only done in evil, as compared to the love of God, to the light of Jesus that brings us into a whole different, promise of everlasting life. And so, even Bram Stoker's Dracula deepens my Catholic faith. I remember one time reading I think it was an autobiography of Ingrid Bergman. It's that actor thing. She was talking about, and she had a stage career in addition to her movies. She reading about this, she would always find a Catholic church to go into to pray, to sit in. That's prayer's my word, not hers. To sit in, before an opening night, to calm her down and steady her nerves. And the book, I remember, said, because they're open. The Catholic Church is always open. But I hear that. There's lots of places that are open. She could go into a library, They're very quiet. They're very quiet too. But, I heard that, and how I read into it is, oh no. Even without knowing it, even without even realizing it, what she's feeling is the holy presence of Jesus in that space. That's what's calming her down. She may not know it, but that's exactly indeed what it is. So, I throw this stuff out at you because, I've got to ask you then, what kind of parallels, what kind of connections can you make, from your life and the things in your world, that can draw you here and help this to make even more sense to you. There's a whole theology about the kitchen table. The family, my family had this wonderful big old house in Bellevue, and everything that took place in the family went around the kitchen table. All the big powwows, everything was kitchen table, And isn't that what this is? For us, this is our kitchen table, our table, where the family comes with all that we have and all that we are. We bring it to the Lord, and He sanctifies it. In my last rectory in New Brighton, and then at St. Athanasius, and now at St. John Newman, where I'm going to live, there has been a Eucharistic chapel for prayer. And I have come to love that. That is so, so very wonderful to be able to have that. It's become so important for me. And because I need so much to be in the presence of Jesus, sometimes with a lot to say, sometimes with nothing to say. Whether I'm happy, sad, mad, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm feeling or what you're feeling. What matters is that we bring it to Jesus. Exactly as we are, we come to Jesus. Now, there's another point here that I think we need to look at tonight as well, and it's also related to the Gospel of John. There are two sections in his Gospel that he teaches about the Eucharist. The first, as we discussed, was that bread of life discourse that begins in chapter 6. But he also touches on the Eucharist again much later in chapter 13 at the Last Supper. Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, talk about the institution of the Eucharist in their Gospels. He gives us the words that we pray at Mass. John doesn't do that at the Last Supper. John gives us the washing of the feet. John has already talked to us. He's already taught us about the Eucharist way back in chapter 6, remember? So when we get to the Last Supper, he's going to do this very beautiful farewell discourse, which is a lot of Jesus' teachings gathered, at the Last Supper. But he also gives us that incredible example of Jesus washing the feet. The master becomes the servant. The first is last. The Lord becomes the slave. John is pressing at this point, he's presuming at this point, rather, that his readers know about our belief in the Eucharist, and the Last Supper. So what he's showing us here is that we take what we believe about the Eucharist, and then we make sure that we put it into action. That we've got to live what it is, not just adore what it is. So, it's something, this is something to which we must be attentive in our lives. It's, coming before the Lord in the Eucharist it's comforting, it's lovely, it's beautiful, it's cozy, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And especially in Eucharistic adoration, it's even more beautiful, with the glittering monstrance and the candles and sometimes flowers, and it's just incense, it's just a beautiful thing to kind of get wrapped up in, and it draws us into the mystery, to the beauty of it all, and it's lovely. But we always must remember the challenge of Jesus, that we need to love one another as he loves us. And where do we see this most? I think is in the Mass. The Mass, think about it, it really ends abruptly. We receive communion, there's one last prayer, and out we go. Now, sometimes we stop for announcements and things like that prolongs it a little bit. But the structure of the Mass itself, it's not like another play or a movie, where there's kind of a wind down, where there's a conclusion, where there's a happy ending, there's curtain calls, all that stuff. It's just over, boom. The Mass is ended, go in peace. Glorify the Lord by your life, whatever the words is. And that's the whole point. Having been fed with the body and blood of Christ, that the body and blood of Christ in us, now the job is to let it transform us and to help us then to be kind, to be merciful, to be loving as Jesus would have us do. And we get the fuel to do that, the capacity to do that, the energy to do that. We get it from him. We get it from Jesus. We get it from the Eucharist. It's going to transform us more and more and more and more. The more we receive it, the more we pray with it, the more we are aware of the power of the Eucharist in our lives, it continues to change us and transform us in powerful and wonderful ways. Well, okay, I'm looking at my notes here. Where am I? Oh, okay. One of the most, I'm going to talk about one of the saints now that I think her story totally exemplifies this connection between loving our Lord Jesus in the Eucharist and living like Jesus because we have the Eucharist. And it's the story of an American woman by the name of Elizabeth Ann Bailey Seton. A tremendous, tremendous thing. It's a very important date in Catholic Church history in the United States. Is one that none of us knows. I didn't even know it. I had to look it up. March 15th, 1805. That was the day that Elizabeth Ann Seton became a Catholic. She was from upper class New York society. Her father was a big-time doctor. I'm pretty sure this is true, that as a young girl, she danced at the inauguration ball of George Washington. Her family, they were very prominent, affluent New Yorkers. And she married a man named William McGee Seton. They had 5 children, and he was a merchant, and things were going very, very well. But then financial reversals started to hit them, and he became sick. And so there was a trip to Italy planned to hopefully restore his health as well as to restore the family finances, but through this merchant. Well, when they get to Italy, not only is he not better, he's worse. I forget what he had, but he's in quarantine and he dies on ship. He never, ever, no, that's not true. They were in some building. He came off the ship and they were in some kind of stone building or something called the Lazaretto. And he died there. And she and her daughter, she went with her oldest daughter, and they were stuck in quarantine too as well, until it was proven that they did not have the illness. So she's, the finances are a mess. Her husband's dead. She's in a foreign country. What do you do? Well, luckily, her husband had some very nice business associates, 2 brothers by the name of Felici, good Italian gentlemen. And the Felicis then took care of the young widow Seton. Now, Elizabeth Seton is, of course, she's a Christian. upper class New York society. She, of course, would be Church of England, and she was very devout. She was very, very devout Episcopalian. No question about that. She knew and loved Jesus very much. But in Italy, this was her first experience with Roman Catholicism, drawn in maybe by the beauty, of the churches and things that she saw there. Because if there were any Catholic churches in New York City at that time, they weren't very much to look at. You can be sure of that. More like clapboard things, thrown together in a hurry. But it was this, the kindness of the Felicis, these Catholic laymen, their goodness to her, that kind of made her start to look at Catholicism with a different light, started to remove some of those prejudices, that were already in America at that time towards the Catholic Church. And then she started to ask questions, and she started to go into the church, and she started to feel then the draw of the power of the Eucharist. So there's two things, that helped Elizabeth Seton then become Catholic. One, of course, was her growing belief in the Eucharist, and the other was the kindness, the charity of these Eucharist-receiving Catholics, who looked after her in her great need. And when she became a Catholic, this was not an easy thing for her to do, because she received a tremendous amount of ridicule and rejection and belittling by everybody that she knew and grew up with, her husband's family, and her sorrows didn't stop there. How many daughters died? I think 2 of her daughters died in her time. Her husband's sisters, 2 of his sisters both came, Harriet and Cecilia Seton, both came to her, and eventually both entered the Sisters of Charity community. They both died. The woman had tremendous heartbreak and hardship in her life, and yet she formed the first American religious community, the Daughters of Charity, or also known as the Sisters of Charity, and she was the foundation of the Catholic school system here in the United States of America. All because Eucharist receiving Catholics lived out their faith and their kindness towards this widow stuck in a bad situation in New York City. It's a powerful thing, I think, her story. How about both aspects, how that comes together in such a tremendously powerful way. So, my dear people of God, look at what the Eucharist can do for her, for me, for you. It's truly, we're on this journey, a wonderful walk with Jesus, who loves us so much, that he comes to us and remains with us and wants us to always then be with him. So, okay. Any questions? Anything? Yes, please. No. Sermon of the Mount is in Matthew. Matthew's Gospel. This is the Gospel of John, chapter 6, and it begins with the feeding of the 5,000. Okay?